Okay. I would like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 27th, 2024 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is J.D. Patriva, Councillor and Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given, and if assistance is required, please see the Deputy Clerk. So Devan will lead us out in the event of anything catastrophic. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure your cell phones are on silent or turned off. And lastly, but not leastly, the Town of Lincoln Committee of the Whole meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all of our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. Members of committee are in attendance in person and remotely, with regrets from Councillor Russell and Councillor Timmers. Councillor Murray will be arriving later this evening. We have staff in attendance in person and remotely. Are there any declarations of interest? And Councillor Reimer?
Thank you, Chair Patriva. I'll be declaring interest in item 8.2.1. The applicant is a close relative of mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any others? Councillor Benchima, you're good tonight? Okay. I would like to request that committee amend the order of tonight's agenda to allow for the Planning and Economic Development agenda to be moved after the consent agenda and before the General Business and Finance Committee agenda, as well as to move item 7.2.2, Economic Development Strategy Results and Next Steps, AD 07-24, to the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda this evening. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik. The committee amend the order of the agenda, consider Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda after the consent agenda and prior to the General Business and Finance Committee agenda, and to move report AD 07-24 to the Planning and Economic Development portion of tonight's agenda. So I will ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And Councillor Rajima, how will you be voting?
In favor.
Thank you. And I'll close that vote and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, terrific. So we have no statutory public meeting this evening. We are now considering the consent agenda inclusive of Downtown Bench Beamsville Business Improvement Area regarding the 2024 slate of officers and the 2024 fees and charges utilities amendment FN 07-24. Would any member of committee like to remove an item from the consent agenda to discuss? Okay. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer that all items listed under the heading of consent agenda for Monday, May 27, 2024 be adopted as recommended. Downtown Bench Beamsville Business Improvement Area regarding the 2024 slate of officers and the 2024 fees and charges utilities amendment FN 07-24. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. Councillor Rajima, may I have your vote, please?
In favor. Thank you, Devan.
Thank you. And that carries. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. We will now begin with the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda for this evening. So we are now considering report PD 25-24 regarding long-term easement agreements on unopened Aberdeen road allowance. The senior planner will provide introductory remarks. Mr. Workington, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if committee's aware, but Mr. Reimer, the applicant, was here, but unfortunately he had a family emergency to attend to. But regardless, as is highlighted in the report, the matter of providing legal access to Mr. Reimer's landlocked property has been an ongoing matter for some time. While the town's policies don't allow for the sale and closure of the unopened Aberdeen Road allowance, they do provide flexibility on how situations like this can be addressed. For the past 2 years, town staff, including myself, the director beside me, Mr. Graham, as well as Mr. Bruder, have been working with Mr. Reimer to find a solution on this matter. The result of that work has been the ongoing creation of an easement agreement between the town, Mr. Reimer, and other users of the unopened road allowance. That also includes the owners of 4811 Fly Road, who are at the corner of the unopened road allowance and Fly, as well as Hydro. The easement agreement represents good planning, as it meets several objectives for both parties as well as the town. This includes the town retaining ownership of the road allowance for future improvements, formalizing the current use of the road allowance by the owners of 4811 provides Fly Road, my apologies, allows them to have certainties over how much of the easement they can use, as well as their maintenance activities. It also provides the legal framework for Mr. Reimer to begin the process of designing and eventually constructing a driveway to his property. This is particularly important from a health and safety perspective, as there are no driveways or paths that currently lead to his property for emergency responders to use. It's important to note that this agreement does not give Mr. Reimer or adjacent landowners permission to undertake specific works on the road allowance or their properties. To undertake those activities, such as constructing new buildings, would require additional approvals from the Niagara Escarpment Commission and the town's public works departments if those improvements are indeed incurring on the unopened road allowance. Instead, this agreement forms the foundation for those activities to potentially occur in the future, as the agreement outlines the roles, responsibilities, and liabilities of all the applicable parties. Thank you very much for considering this motion today, or this report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Josh. Do members of committee have any questions? Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Workington. Josh, would you give us a quick update on where we stood when this was last discussed publicly? I remember there being, I don't want to use the word confusion, but it wasn't clear exactly where we were going. So it would be helpful to me to know what the progress was that was actually made when you got together and talked about this most recently.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So the last report that came forward to council was really exploring the feasibility or to determine whether or not it would be allowable to close and sell the unopened road allowance to Mr. Reimer. Through that report, it was determined that it would not meet the town's policies. So from there, what we did was work to find a solution that didn't involve selling the road allowance, but also not requiring the town to actually improve the road. So this is essentially a middle ground. The town allows ownership, or retains ownership, but Mr. Reimer can, if this agreement were to be put in place, would have the ability to submit a permit to Public Works and the Niagara Escarpment Commission to construct an access. It's taken some time to get to this point, just because of how many landowners there are involved that are adjacent to it, as well as Hydro has some easements on it as well. So it took some time to really iron out those items as well.
So the important piece is our agreement that he can go ahead and make future applications. I mean, that's really a very technical piece, and I that was the one thing that I didn't remember us ever talking about that.
Through you, Chair. So, yeah, this is a different process from the typical closure and road sale. Basically, this agreement sets in place the foundation for future activities to occur. From the town's perspective, it's really important to have this agreement in place because it, A, allows us to retain ownership of the road allowance, but it also protects us from any liabilities that might arise. At the same time, it also provides a benefit for Mr. Reimer in that he has some form of legal access to his property, but to actually improve the road allowance would require additional permits from the town as well as the NEC.
Okay, and they will either permit it or they won't.
That's correct.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you very much, through you to Josh. Just with regards to the agreement itself and the report in the last bullet proof where it talks about, it looks like this agreement is in perpetuity, from what I can read, but should the property transfer, there's a sale or a transfer of ownership, can I get some clarification on that so that there's no confusion? Should this happen with a future landowner when purchasing or possibly purchasing that property, that there's not going to be any expectations from the town to do more than what's agreed upon?
Through you, Chair. So I think there's 2 points to that. One is the timeline or applicability of the agreement. So there are clauses in this agreement that allow for the termination of it. And I can work on that wording as well to make it clear. I can speak with our solicitors, Aaron Burles, about that. There's also clauses in the agreement that essentially say that if someone purchases this property, this landlocked property, they're also bound to these agreements or the clauses within the agreement. So essentially, nothing can occur, no changes can occur to this agreement unless it's brought forward to the town and we agree to them.
Yeah, no, it's I don't think it's typical. It's not typical for municipalities to do this. I'm not that I'm aware of. It's kind of like a road allowance, or it's like a or no, what those assumed roads that we have, those given roads. Except this is kind of the opposite of that. So I just want to make sure that there's clarity. Should any transfer of ownership, there's no expectations on the town, and currently that's what I'm reading, but as long as there's no changes 10, 20 years from now. Thank you.
And if I may, Chair, to your point, and to use a phrase that I've heard here in the council chambers, this is really a made-in Lincoln solution. We're approaching this, we're trying to be proactive in fixing a problem that should not have existed. Town staff have been really diligent on making sure that, good planning principles here are addressed, particularly that health and safety aspect, because there are lots of farmers out here, and there's unfortunately stories where first responders don't know where a field is, or they're unable to reach it. So this is really to, ameliorate those unfortunate circumstances right now, but also ensure that the town is protected and that we're retaining our infrastructure.
Okay. Yeah, and Josh, I want to thank you as well. Councilor Brunet and myself have been working with you and staff on this, and we, it is a made-in-Lincoln solution. It was something that's not typical, but you looked outside of the box and you found a solution, and I commend you for it. Keep up the good work. So, there being no further discussion for this item, I have a motion moved by Councilor Brunet. The committee receive and file for information report PD 25-24, long-term easement agreements on unopened Aberdeen road allowance. An update to road closing application 2022-01 by Quarry Ridge Incorporated. The committee directs staff to enter into a long-term easement agreement with Quarry Ridge Incorporated and the owners of 4811 Fly Road for the use of the town's unopened Aberdeen road allowance as shown on Appendix A. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. Councillor Rajima, may I please get your vote?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Devan. So we will now consider Report AD 07-24, Economic Development Strategy Results and Next Steps. Prior to the presentation, I will ask that committee proceed with the majority vote to request an extension for the presentation until complete. I have a motion moved by Councillor McCulloch the committee extend the presentation time regarding Report AD 07-24, Economic Development Strategy Results and Next Steps until completed. I will ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. Councillor Rajima?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you, and I will close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, so we have our Director of Economic Development and Acting CAO, Mr. Deanne, Economic Development Officer, Mr. Rotz, and Tourism Development Officer, Ms. Basilewski, will now provide us a presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Patrick. Very appreciate the introduction. And good evening, Maryson, Chair, and members of council. To channel our inner CAO and everyone, we intend to be incredibly brief this evening, so thank you. We can all tell them we said that. So Economic Development is pleased to be in front of you this evening presenting the results of our 2019 to 2023 Economic Development Strategy, our guiding document for over the last 5 years to create economic prosperity for all of Lincoln. So back in 2018, when I stood in front of you presenting this plan, little did I know of the success we would have in helping put Lincoln on the map for private sector investment and job creation, but we have done just that. As you will recall, economic development is about setting the stage for investment and economic growth, because once the private sector realizes that Lincoln is a great place to do business, they'll invest their hard-earned money, bettering the community for all. So thankfully, we have seen that happen over the past 5 years, and we look forward to talking about our successes this evening and, of course, the next steps to developing our economic development strategy, or our new economic development strategy. So, our economic development strategy highlighted 6 economic development roles and strategies to drive results for our community. They are promoting an open for business message, helping our existing businesses grow through strategic business retention and expansion initiatives, helping spur innovation and entrepreneurship, attracting new investment, developing a skilled workforce, and helping to showcase Lincoln as a great place to have a career. And lastly, marketing and communication to ensure ongoing dialogue with existing and potential investors, highlighting that Lincoln is a great place to grow, prosper, and belong. As members of council will know, obviously we had a little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic through the middle of our economic development strategy, and staff were forced to modify our original plans with specific short-term focuses on helping support our communities throughout the pandemic. Of course, with the support of council and our colleagues here at Town Hall, we were able to do just that and deliver those results and come out stronger on the back end, which we will highlight later on. In addition, our sectors of focus in our community, highlighting the diversity that is our local economy, are agriculture, food and beverage and manufacturing, tourism, and manufacturing in general. Each of these roles and strategies and sectors of focus had associated action items that helped us deliver on our plan, which you will find as Appendix B to this report. I am pleased to announce that every single action item has either been completed or is ongoing. The results speak for themselves. We have more businesses in Lincoln than we had when we started the strategy, and we have more jobs than we had 5 years ago. And I know Mr. Rotz will be taking us through the next few slides to highlight those key activities and their successes.
Thank you, Paul. So employment rate, unemployment rate, job growth, and business growth are all key performance indicators used to showcase the growth of Lincoln's economy over the past 5 years. The pandemic undoubtedly impacted the overall growth of Lincoln's economy. However, all of Lincoln's KPIs have surpassed pre-pandemic levels from 2019 to 2023. The unemployment rate has decreased by 1.2% since 2019, even with the pandemic increasing unemployment rate to 11% at its highest in 2022. Jobs in Lincoln have increased by 1,992, or 14%, and businesses in Lincoln have increased by 589, which includes home-based businesses without employees. Lincoln's key businesses continue to be represented within the agriculture, manufacturing, construction, retail trade, wholesale trade, accommodation and food services, and healthcare sectors, which make up 66% of the total jobs in Lincoln in 2023. Occupied industrial and commercial properties pay the highest rates in property taxes in Lincoln. This is why the growth of our local industries is key to not only support our local economy, but also to generate meaningful revenue for the municipality through the town's property taxes. As you can see from the table on the slide, since the launch of our economic development strategy in 2019, commercial and industrial property taxes have seen a steady increase to the overall municipal tax revenue growth in Lincoln, aside from a slight lull in 2021, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic shutdowns. Commercial and industrial properties have contributed largely to the growth of our tax base in Lincoln. Business retention expansion and investment attraction were two important roles of the town's economic development strategy over the past 5 years. Parts of the success of these roles can be measured by new and existing business growth through the town of Lincoln's building permitting process. From 2019 to 2023, the town saw over $140 million of estimated construction value from approximately 160 building permits from agriculture, commercial, and industrial-based businesses in Lincoln, with a majority coming from existing businesses in Lincoln. Some of the larger developments from 2019 to 2023 are shown in the table on the slide. Some notable developments include AMSI's new development, which included 120 net new jobs this past year, Buchenstein Greenhouse's new greenhouse facility, which added an additional 20 full-time jobs, and Opart Hygiene, which added an additional 60 full-time jobs with the expansion. It is important to note that staff only become aware of new businesses opening in Lincoln by reviewing the town's building permits, word of mouth, general inquiries, or simply by driving by the location. Over the past 5 years, it is estimated that approximately 60 new storefront businesses have chosen Lincoln to start or relocate their operation. However, if we were to include the opening of home-based businesses, as mentioned earlier, this number is much larger. As mentioned in the last slide, business retention and expansion which simply means supporting our local businesses to grow and succeed, is a key role of economic development in the town of Lincoln. Over the past 5 years, staff have implemented a variety of structured BR&E programs to support our local business community. Back in 2019, and once again in 2023, staff alongside members of council conducted our Business Walks program to meet with new business owners and build working relationships with our local entrepreneurs. When the pandemic hit in 2020, staff proactively initiated sector-specific calls to provide pandemic support on the up-to-date regulations, programs, and more from upper levels of government. When the pandemic hit in 2020, staff also launched our Business e-newsletter to provide continued outreach as well as keep our businesses and stakeholders up to date on all the ongoing COVID-19 related updates. At its early stages, the ongoing e-newsletter consisted of the newest guidelines, government support grants and funding, and other important business-related news from across all levels of government. The newsletter has now become a permanent resource and communication tool for economic development staff to our business community. To date, we have sent just over 170 newsletters to a growing audience of 754 recipients with an average open rate of 55%. Another important BR&E program utilized by staff over the past 5 years was the Digital Main Streets Digital Service Squad program. Since 2019, the town received $152,000 from the Digital Service Squad grant program for 5 consecutive years to help businesses grow online through programs such as the Digital Transformation Grant, Google My Business Updates, and 360 Photos, and more. With the conclusion of the grant program in 2023, we're excited to say that the town of Lincoln businesses received approximately 2,500 digital transformation grants, circulating a total of $250,000 to help our businesses adopt online technologies. Also, another tool to support our businesses during the pandemic was the creation of ShopLincoln.ca. In 2020, ShopLincoln.ca, which has now transitioned to the NiagaraBenchlands.ca, was created as an online resource to support shopping local during the pandemic. The website allowed businesses to create a listing, showcase to customers their hours of operation, curbside pickup availability, and more. With the pandemic behind us, the website transitioned to NiagaraBenchlands.ca to support Lincoln's growing tourism sector. Workforce development and access to a qualified workforce became a key component of economic development during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many businesses found themselves struggling to keep an adequate number of staff to run their operations. In 2023, thanks to $58,000 from the Province of Ontario's Rural Economic Development Fund, we launched our Work in Lincoln program to help connect local employers to talented job seekers in the area. The Work in Lincoln website allows local employers to create an account and submit job postings while also allowing job seekers to apply for job postings and join the resume database. Since launch of the website in February of 2023, it has seen over 11,000 unique users, 87 total employers have registered, 155 resumes have been added to the resume database, and a total of 212 jobs have been posted on the site. In part of the Work in Lincoln initiative, the town also hosted 3 job fairs in 2023 and into 2024 to further help fill vacancies and careers in the town of Lincoln's local economy. All 3 job fairs were hosted at Great Lakes Christian High School and saw over 1,300 total attendees connect with 82 local employers throughout the 3 events. Each job fair was an overwhelming success, with many local employers interviewing and hired new employees on the spot. Another initiative to support workforce development in Lincoln was the launch of the Youth Skills Studio in 2021. In partnership with Civic Connect, a local not-for-profit organization, the town of Lincoln received $2 million in 2021, $2.5 million in 2022, and an additional $2.9 million in 2023 of funding from the Province of Ontario's Skills Development Fund to develop and run the Youth Skills Studio. The Youth Skills Studio is a work-integrated learning environment that provides paid employment to youth aged 15 to 29 to work on technology-based projects for local businesses. The program is designed to support youth retention and talent attraction here in our community, while also supporting our local businesses to grow and enhance their digital presence. From 2021 to 2023, the Youth Skills Studio trained 600 youth participants, provided 300,000 hours of work-integrated learning, and delivered over 250 projects to local businesses. Another important element of Lincoln's economic development strategy was innovation and leadership. By early 2022, the Downtown Bench Beamsville BIA, Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, and Civic Connect began sharing the office space at 4996 Beam Street, Beamsville. The three organizations, which collectively focus on supporting the Town of Lincoln's business community, now call the office space home at the Town of Lincoln owned facility. Alongside the Town of Lincoln Economic Development Department, the four organizations continue to work together to achieve the common goal of supporting the business community and facilitating economic growth and prosperity throughout the municipality. Moreover, in 2019, with the support of Spark Niagara, the Town of Lincoln hosted Ontario's first Agritech Hackathon at Beamsville District Secondary School to bring together agriculture and technology to provide innovative solutions to the challenges facing modern agriculture and value-added agriculture. In 2020, despite the challenges from the pandemic, the event was held virtually and welcomed more than 210 attendees, 35 teams, and 131 participants from across 22 different countries. The Agritech Hackathon, thanks to $10,000 in support from the Niagara Region Local Area Municipality Fund, helped support Ontario's agriculture, horticulture, and ecotourism sectors. Attracting investments was also top of mind for economic development throughout the past 5 years. Since 2020, economic development staff have been working with internet service providers to expand broadband connectivity across Lincoln. At the beginning of the pandemic, we supported NWIC's applications for the province of Ontario's Improving Connectivity in Ontario program and Canada's Centre of Excellence in Next Generation Networks program. Economic Development also provided letters of support for Rogers, Xplornet, NRBN, and NWIC for their applications toward the Universal Broadband Fund to implement projects and infrastructure that improve broadband coverage across the town. Staff also launched our broadband survey and analysis to showcase the underserviced areas across town to help support all the applicants. In 2023, the Town of Lincoln saw two significant announcements made by Bell and NWIC to increase broadband access in our community, with hopefully another announcement coming soon on fiber investment into the rural areas. In 2019, the Town of Lincoln also adopted the Rural Area and Industrial CIP program to promote private sector development on industrial designated and zoned lands, as well as development of value-added agriculture uses and agriculture-related uses on designated and zoned agricultural lands. Bench Brewing Company and Cave Spring Vineyards are just two of the rural Lincoln businesses who utilize this new CIP program at the time. Last month, Economic Development staff launched Lincoln's first ever community profile. Through data gathered from Statistics Canada and with further data received from Niagara Region Economic Development, Lincoln's new community profile will provide investors, residents, and businesses with current economic data representing the Town of Lincoln. Government relations is also a key component of economic development and investment attraction within the Town of Lincoln. Over the past 5 years, a Town of Lincoln delegation has participated at the annual AMO and Roma conferences to meet with provincial ministries to discuss key issues impacting the municipality and help gain support for Lincoln's corporate objectives. The annual AMO and Roma conferences will continue to be a key element of government relations for the Town of Lincoln. With the help of these delegation meetings, various departments within the town have been successful in receiving funding for Lincoln's necessary projects, programs, and initiatives to support our municipality. Infrastructure to support an open business for message was also a key element of our economic development strategy. Staff, with the help of $9,600 from the Province of Ontario's Rural Economic Development Fund, updated Lincoln's QEW gateway sign at the Beamsville interchange, enhancing our destination identity to those traveling south along the highway. The updates included new landscaping, new sign lettering, and enhanced lighting. Moreover, in collaboration with the Downtown Bench Beamsville BIA, the Town of Lincoln successfully launched the Big Benches initiative strategically placed at key locations throughout the town. By showcasing these landmarks, we aim to draw more tourists to experience the charm and natural beauty of Lincoln firsthand. Additionally, the benches will play a pivotal role in shaping the town's tourism brand, further solidifying our identity as the Niagara Benchlands. This project was made possible thanks to $63,400 in funding from the Government of Canada's Community Revitalization Fund. Now, although not directly outlined in our economic development strategy, providing support for our existing business community during the COVID-19 pandemic became an important element of economic development for the Town of Lincoln. One method of support came through distributing face shields, face masks, and rapid testing kits during the pandemic. In total, economic development staff distributed 1,400 face shields to over 120 businesses, 248,000 face masks to various Lincoln businesses, first responders, and other stakeholders in the community, and in partnership with the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary Club of Lincoln, delivered over 7,300 rapid testing kits to 66 local businesses. Another source of support came from just under $500,000 in funding for Lincoln tourism businesses from the Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Fund. Niagara Economic Development, in partnership with the local area municipalities, was able to secure $2 million in funding from the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario to support Niagara tourism industry in its recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The town's economic development and tourism team worked closely with 41 tourism-based businesses to secure 25% of the total awarded funding, amounting to $475,000. Many of the projects included COVID-19 adaptations and patio enhancements, such as the photo from Rosewood Estate Winery seen on the slide. And I'm now going to pass it along to Brittany to finish off the rest.
Thank you, Cameron. And just members of council, just before Brittany jumps in, I just want to make a few comments on our 2020 tourism strategy and action plan. So as you will recall, that our economic development strategy did identify tourism as being one of our greatest avenues for economic growth and job creation here in our community. So that is why the first recommendation in our economic development strategy said go off and do a tourism strategy, which council unanimously adopted in June of 2020. So over the past 4 years, we've been working that plan, helping to activate our tourism sector and grow our economy in our rural areas and in our downtowns as well through increased tourism. Everyone around the council table tonight knows that Lincoln is a great destination. From our award-winning craft beverages to our exquisite culinary, Lincoln obviously has it all. To support our tourism development work, council saw fit to adopt a new destination brand known as the Niagara Benchlands, which we've seen successes over the past 3 years with that brand, and we will continue to build upon that success. So now I'd like to turn it over to Brittany to go through the next few slides.
Thank you, Mr. Deaney. Good evening, members of council, Madam Mayor. I have the pleasure today of bringing you through some of the key activities we are proud to showcase as part of the update from our economic development strategy update for you. First one we want to talk about is the CoLab portal. So developed in partnership with our friends at Civic Connect and the Youth Skills Studio in 2022, the CoLab portal tool was initiated to help foster innovative tourism development, bolster collaboration and innovation to help grow Lincoln's tourism business support network with our local operators. This portal stands as a testament to the town's commitment to fostering a thriving tourism business community here in the Benchlands. Its success to date reflects a collaborative spirit and proactive efforts of our local businesses and the unwavering support from you, members of council, to continue to arm our local businesses with the tools and resources they so desperately need to grow, prosper, and belong here in Lincoln. The portal's easy interface allows for seamless communication amongst our operators, fostering a stronger level of communication and a network of local enterprises and industry experts. This innovative tool has also translated into enhanced visitor experiences, also encouraging businesses to work together to create a more succinct and compelling tourism operating for our visitors. By keeping our tourism sector up to date, we empower our local businesses to make informed decisions and capitalize on the new and dynamic opportunities available to them. As we continue to build upon this foundation, staff will continue to update and enhance this tool, helping local businesses attract more visitors, collaborate more effectively, and drive economic growth for Lincoln's tourism sector. Additionally, Niagara Benchlands Destination Development Fund is another tool that was initiated and developed by town staff and supported by town council to help support our business network. Introduced in 2022, the fund is an example of the pivotal initiatives that we require to enhance the visibility of the Benchlands and grow Lincoln's tourism sector. In its first 2 years, the fund has successfully supported 10 different local tourism projects. Since 2022, a total of $42,500 has been allocated to these projects, providing vital financial assistance to drive innovation and development in Lincoln's tourism sector. Supported projects include, but are not limited to, projects like Blossom Fest, the Jingle Bar, and the recent Winter Wine Trail, and so much more. The financial support by the program has enabled our local businesses to undertake or enhance and advance their experiences, product offerings, and attractions. These projects have helped create and contribute to a more richer and more positive, diverse tourism experience for visitors, elevating Lincoln's overall profile as a top tourism destination. By funding projects that focus on marketing and promotional activities, the fund has played a crucial role in raising awareness of the Niagara Benchlands since its adoption. This increased visibility attracts more visitors, boosts local business revenues, and contributes to our overall economic growth here in the community. The program has also encouraged businesses to innovate and develop new attractions and experiences, keeping Lincoln's tourism sector fresh and competitive. This spirit of innovation ensures that we continually offer unique and memorable experiences to our visitors. The Niagara Benchlands Destination Development Fund is a clear indicator of this council's commitment to fostering a vibrant tourism industry for Lincoln. We look forward to continue developing this program over the years, and even more so, we look forward to bringing a recommendation report forward to council on July 15th, which town staff will present the 2024 proposed winners for this fund. Additionally, destination marketing campaigns, as you're all well aware, along with festival and events, play a crucial role in boosting Lincoln's local economy by attracting visitors, increasing visitor spending, and supporting our local business community. These type of activities allow the town to tell the stories of our destination, creating a lively atmosphere that enhances the town's overall appeal as a compelling destination, fostering repeat visits and long-term economic benefits. These campaign tactics and events and festivals that you see before you have significantly helped to increase visitor awareness and engagement, contributing to the overall growth of our tourism economy over the last 5 years. Additionally, local favorites such as Fling on King with our coveted Benchlands Poorhouse have also helped to strengthen staff's community ties, encouraging residents to also participate and take pride in our local tourism offerings. The successful execution of these key events and campaigns really truly underscore our commitment to fostering a vibrant and thriving economy here in Lincoln. By building upon these successes, we look forward to continuing to develop innovative activations and campaigns through our work with the City of St. Catharines and our joint DMO project, further enhancing Lincoln's appeal as a top-tier tourist destination. Moving on to our destination marketing organization, in a forward-thinking move, we, the town, have initiated a partnership with the City of St. Catharines to establish a strategic joint marketing organization for our two collective communities here in Lincoln and St. Catharines. Approved in December of 2023, the establishment of this new joint marketing organization marks a significant milestone in our tourism development strategy. This collaboration leverages the strengths and resources of both municipalities, creating a powerful and unified marketing voice for West Niagara. By positioning the town of Lincoln as the expert destination manager, we ensure the effective oversight and strategic planning for tourism development. This strategic role allows us to coordinate infrastructure, enhance visitor services, and support our local businesses. As you know, the incoming DMO will specialize in destination marketing, leveraging its expertise in marketing to promote Lincoln and the Niagara Benchlands as a world-class tourism destination to a wider, more engaged audience. This focused approach leverages Lincoln and St. Catharines' impactful MAT tax revenues, additional private sector investments, as well as enhances our overall marketing efforts to attract more visitors and increase tourism revenues collectively together through a shared services model. Because of this well-coordinated tourism strategy, we anticipate seeing higher visitor numbers and longer stays in our community, inevitably leading to increased spending at local businesses, restaurants, and attractions. This influx of tourism dollars will not only support job creation, but it will also help to boost Lincoln's overall economy. Our dedicated staff are actively advancing this project currently, and we are looking forward to building an even stronger foundation for Lincoln's future tourism success. Perhaps one of the projects we're most excited about currently as we continue to engage in 2024 is the adoption of Lincoln's municipal accommodations tax. The introduction of this tax represents Lincoln's forward-thinking approach to funding tourism development in our community. This strategic step aligns with our long-term vision for sustainable tourism growth in the Benchlands. By levying this transient accommodations tax, we create a dedicated revenue stream to support tourism-related projects and initiatives within our community. The implementation of this new MAT allows us to generate tourism revenue without increasing taxes on our local residents. This approach ensures that the financial burden of tourism development is shared by the visitor, who directly benefits from the services and attractions available in our community. The revenue will be crucial, as we know, for enhancing Lincoln's tourism infrastructure, our marketing efforts, and overall visitor services. The revenue from MAT truly enables us to invest in key tourism development projects, driving economic growth and improving and enhancing the overall visitor experience. These investments might look like and include things like infrastructure upgrades, enhanced marketing campaigns, and even new attractions that will help to create a more compelling draw to Lincoln. We are excited that the MAT will provide a sustainable funding model to ensure long-term tourism growth while preserving our community's resources and unique sense of character. With the MAT in place, we are well positioned to continue to keep developing Lincoln as a premier tourist destination. Mr. Deaney, over to you.
So thank you, Brittany, and members of council. Now that we have concluded our 5-year economic development strategy, staff are working on creating a new strategy for our community. To be completed completely in-house, our new strategy will build upon our successes and take key elements from our previous strategy and roll them over to be more targeted for economic growth and prosperity. So this will allow us to better align our new strategy with our current trends and needs for the community. So to help inform this new strategy, we'll be conducting a series of outreach initiatives to allow our business community to map out our activities over the next 2 to 3 years. We'll be doing this through roundtable discussions, which we have begun with our greenhouse sector, business walks initiatives, surveys, and one-on-one discussions with major sectors of our local economy. Staff look forward to coming back later this year with our final recommendations, and of course, members of council, we thank you for your indulgences this evening. We look forward to any questions. So Chair, back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul, Cameron, and Brittany. Do members of committee have any questions? Councillor Murray. Deputy Mayor Murray, sorry.
Vice Chair, come on, I need it all, I need it all. Thank you very much for the presentation, guys. It's exciting to see all the things that have happened over the past 4 years. I did want to note, when you talk about your newsletter and the 55% open rate, that's phenomenal. Like, that's, like, 35 is excellent, so it's really exciting to see that. I'm wondering if you can give me a little bit of insight into how, is it just a really well-curated list? Is it that you guys are developing excellent content? What's driving those phenomenal numbers?
So, Chair, through you to our Vice Chair and Deputy Mayor, I think you answered it, Councillor. I think it's a well-curated list going directly to those that are most in need of some of the information at our local business, but also the content. We make sure the content is fresh week after week. We ensure that we're sharing not only information from what's happening here at Town Hall, but we also share provincial and federal government information, things that are happening in the community, in the province, and the country, and things that are much more useful to those local businesses. So grants that may be opening up, or trends or changes in legislation, stuff like that. So well-curated list, but also the fresh content that we put out there.
So a follow-up, if I may. So is this list primarily businesses, or is there also just citizens on it as well, or is it very much focused towards businesses?
So Chair, through you, very much focused on businesses. Now, if any residents have signed up, I don't think we'll say no to it, but at this point, I think it's just businesses.
Fair enough. Another question, if I may, Chair?
Number 3.
One was just a follow-up, but that's all right. So on slide 18, you said that you're anticipating, after all the groundwork that's been done on tourism, that the next step is that now the tourists are going to come. Do we have set targets? Do we have expectations? You know, year 4, we're expecting to see X number of tourists coming in, X number of tourism dollars. Do we have those sorts of timelines or metrics in place?
Just going to turn it over to Brittany, Chair.
Through you, Chair, to the Deputy Mayor. One of the things we're working on currently, Councillor, is actually our marketing and communication strategy with the DMO. That is a project that's going to be going out to tender in Q3, and one of the major activities that we're looking to create within there is the key performance indicators. Now, that's the DMO side of things, why we love this dual role in tourism. The other hat we're putting on in Q4 is our destination manager hat. So as our DMO is working up their marketing and communication strategy about how they intend to drive visitor awareness to the Benchlands, we're going to be working on building out those KPIs of what we need by way of infrastructure to support that growth. So look forward to Q4 when we have some of those key targets put in place with a bit more strategy to effectively resource, hopefully, those successes in 2024.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair Murray. Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. Thanks very much for the support. Lots of numbers here. The only one that gets more excited about the numbers might be Charlotte, but there's I like the depth. There's a lot of places that I could ask questions at, but I would like to ask a question on the business page 9 on your report. The business investment in Lincoln, you have a column there, 2023 jobs column. Is there any way, and I realize that that number is something that you know, those are the jobs that are created, and we can't really count on all those staying in Lincoln. But is there a formula, or is there something maybe that industry would use to figure out the indirect? Because there's another column we could put there. There could be construction jobs, there could be, you know, supply chains afterwards, like that number gets way bigger. Is there any way I'm just curious, not that you need to put it in there, I'm just, because that's where I think the ongoing, you know, the service and the maintenance and the supply, a lot of those, especially in the tourism, a lot of those are local. So it'd be interesting to, if there was something through you, Chair, to Cameron?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. Great question. Obviously, with each development, there comes, like you said, those construction-related jobs. I mean, if you drive by AMSI right now, you'll see the signs of the people who have worked on that facility over the past year. You see some local companies such as Verhoof Electric, their signs right out there. We can look, I don't have that answer, obviously, right now, but something we can look into maybe with our Niagara region counterparts to see how many indirect jobs through constructions and things such
Yeah,
like
sure.
that.
Yeah, I was just curious,
look into
that's
it.
all. And actually, now that you say that, yeah, the region would capture, you know, those numbers would, staying in the region, very high number, right? Like Lincoln there, I'm sure a lot of them stay here, but the region would capture, you know, even a deeper view of those numbers.
Mhm. And they might have some kind of idea on maybe some like an average of how many jobs indirectly are supported by a certain square footage or size of a development as well. So something we'll look into.
Great. One more question, if I may. Chair Patriva, the roundtable discussions and the tourism town halls, is it possible to put in a request that those continue no matter what your strategy, long-term strategy becomes? I've got a lot of feedback, and it's all positive on those types of getting together. I think a lot of people initially were sort of, you know, looking across the table and what do I want to get together with them for? And I would be in the same industry. Sometimes you want to keep your, you know, I'm not really sure I want to be sharing, but they've all been, I don't know, they've been great. Like I really think those are awesome. So I would hope, I mean, it's not a question, Chair Patrick, but just a encouragement that those kind of things continue.
So through you, Chair, to the councillor, I mean, we're definitely going to continue those. I mean, we're going to be doing them to help inform our economic development strategy, but as we heard at the greenhouse one, I think doing them on a regular basis is a good thing. We did do them throughout the pandemic. If members of council will recall, we did them a little bit virtually at the start, tapping into each of our sectors to see how things were going and progressing and how we could help. But I think from what we've heard, not only recently, but even over the past couple of years, they like that constant level of communication, our business sector. So we're going to go from agriculture, greenhouse, manufacturing, you know, tourism and such, and we're going to keep those going. And Ms. Bazlowski and I were actually just talking about how we can roll in our next tourism town hall with our roundtable discussion around tourism and our new economic development strategy. So we're going to keep those going.
Great. Thank you, Brittany and Paul and Cameron. Thank you, Chair Patrick.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reimer. Councillor McLuck.
Thank you very much, Chair Patriva. Just a point of clarity, was it myself or was it Councillor Rinjema that was, all right, then I'll go. Through you to Paul and staff, thank you very much for the time and this report. And I just want to say, like we've done a lot that we never used to do. Even when I was in business, I never had anyone from the town come visit me and ask how I was doing. I think that goes a long way. Those business walks, those business owners, they really appreciate that, as well as the roundtables, and you know, just being heard. I think that goes a long way. That personal level of services. I also appreciate having, and I think I reached out to you as early as last week with potential expansions, where it's nice having a NEC Dev department where I can refer potential growth to yourself or to your staff to help guide that process through planning, through government red tape and all that stuff. So I do value yours and your staff's effort through ECDEV. Question I have is with regards to tourism, and I travel, a lot of us travel. What are we doing to promote ourselves from there's the Benchlands and there's a website and it's there. But if somebody from Connecticut, how would somebody from Connecticut, how would somebody from Michigan, how would somebody from New York know that we're here? Because I recently went away and speaking to Americans, and I can't believe still to this day they've never heard of our area, or even Niagara on the Lake for that matter.
So Chair, through you to the council, I'm going to start, then Councilor, I'm going to turn over to Brittany to talk a little bit of our international to U.S. market destination awareness. But, part of the idea is how do we, and this really goes down to the role between the municipality, which is around sort of managing the destination, and the new destination marketing organization, which will market the destination. We've been doing both roles simultaneously over the past few years, but we hope to obviously be with our DMO work launch in the new destination marketing organization later this year and for sure into 2025. But I'll turn it over to Brittany. She'll answer a little bit about how we market our destination to the U.S.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Miklick. Great question, Councillor, and how the strategy pans out from a marketing perspective. We at the town have been focusing on drive markets currently, just based on the resources and budget that we currently have available to us to make the biggest amount of impact to our local partners. Right now, we know that domestic travel is our biggest opportunity for growth right now in visitation. We are, however, working with our regional tourism office, being the Tourism Partnership of Niagara, to help leverage our investment to drive a wider audience in some of those international markets. We really rely on that brand equity with Visit Niagara to be able to leverage international markets such as China, larger deep routes into the US, as well as to other major feeder markets like the UK. Please keep in mind that as we continue to grow the DMO and budgets beginning to expand, and we've got more expertise in-house around that marketing table to expand into international markets, we'll do a little bit more of a deep drive. But right now, those minimal dollars and cents that we have are really focusing on our current drive markets. So 401, QEW, 400 to Southwest, all the way up to Ottawa. We do have some affinity in Quebec as well, so we're really capitalizing on markets right now that have an affinity for our destination and welcoming those people back to the destination or welcoming new domestic travelers back to the Benchlands.
Thank you very much. It's specific to the American driving distance, like the 2, 3, 4 hour. When I tell people like your dollar, like it's 35% off. Come to Ontario. I don't care where you go. You come to Ontario. It's 35%. A lot of people still don't even know. They don't know when they're deciding where to go on vacation what a great deal it is here right now for them at this time. So I just want to make sure that we're focusing on that market also. Another question I have through you is with respect to our social media presence and how we promote ourselves from a tourism perspective on social media. When I look at our Facebook page, Twitter page, these sorts of pages, I see a lot of things going on. I see a lot of, handshakes here and, grand opening there and this and that. What do we do with random come visit, like, random business spotlights, random good news stories that we do? Or do we do much of that, or who would be doing that sort of thing?
So Chair, through you to the councillor, we have two sets of social media channels, councillor. One with, the Town of Lincoln side, which we focus on obviously communicating our activities to our residents. We do some business highlights on those pages as well. But from the tourism marketing side, and I'll let Brittany answer as well, there's a whole specific Niagara Benchlands social media presence that I know Brittany makes sure that we put out there information in terms of what's happening at certain businesses and some of the destination awareness. But I'll turn over to Brittany. Go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Miklick. One of the things we do strategically within our Niagara Benchlands consumer-facing feeds is that they are truly visitor-oriented. Anything that we do from the Niagara Benchlands perspective is all about storytelling, Councillor. So it's about highlighting those key brand propositions that we know are our key compelling draws. We talk about our terroir of tastemakers. So we tell those stories through our social media feeds. We talk about all of our beautiful wide open spaces. We are Niagara's other natural wonder. And again, we want to talk about the welcoming nature of our community. So you see our team package these up in relevant stories as opposed to what we like to call pitch slapping our local consumer. We're not here to try to sell you something. We're here to try to paint an image of the destination, create a compelling story that's going to give you a reason to come and visit Lincoln. Additionally, inside the feeds that you're seeing, what you see physically on our present feeds, keep in mind that there's also what we like to call dark social with our paid advertising that you might not be specifically getting because we might not be tailoring a specific message to you in a product offering. However, we are doing segmentation to different audiences with our paid advertising. So you'll see evergreen content coming out, inspirational travel blogs. There's a multimodal approach that we take to tourism and visitor marketing that's not always forward-facing. There's some stuff that's going on behind the scenes, but I think, Councillor, to your point, maybe our team needs to do a bit better job of sharing and championing some of those incredible activities where we're seeing great impact and results as well that might not be forward-facing all the time.
for me. And I just want to make sure, like, I'm a salesman, I'm a salesperson, I'm going out selling our town, telling people to come. These people even want to come stay at my place. I'm not looking for that kind of friends. But, when I tell them to check out the Town of Lincoln website or, check out, they Google Town of Lincoln, I want to make sure that they get an idea of what we're all about through those simple, basic searches that people make. And a lot of times you only have one, most times you only have one chance to make a first impression. I want to make sure that that first impression is the best one. Thank you.
So if I may, Chair, just quickly, Counselor, I appreciate you being a champion of our community, and if you're speaking to residents and they want to know in terms of, what the municipality is doing from a resident perspective, then our Town of Lincoln website. But if you want to know from a tourism side of things, send them to the NiagaraBenchlands.ca. That has a good repertoire of all the destination awareness and all our tourism-based businesses, so.
And if it helps, Councillor Mikulik, we've got one of our brand ambassadors from Vienna, Steve Demora. So my time in tourism, I introduced Steve to Sandra Rice from the OTMPC, and Sandra would host events in New York City, and Steve would go to them. And Steve has continued on this partnership with this group and the AAA Auto Clubs. So it's that drive market at the Winter Wine Fest at Balls Falls. Steve had a crew there from the Finger Lakes that came up and did a lot of filming. So he's also got his import-export license. So anything that he does in the States, he's constantly promoting Benchlands Winery. Steve is a gem and a diamond in the rough and is one of the biggest promoters that we have, and he does it all on his dime. And he's a type of cat that he does it because he loves the Benchlands. He loves, and it's not just about him, it's about everyone that he brings along. He started it in China and Vietnam, and he continues it in the States. And he went and did all of that licensing on his own to be able to do that. So he takes everyone along. So he's the type of guy that will do that, and we've worked in the past with radio stations in the U.S. to get that drive market up here. Like you say, your dollar's worth, $1.35. It's come on over. So you talked about doing something in association with the old Friendship Festival they used to have at Fort Erie, and to get the Americans to come over. So they are working on it, and stuff is going on in the background. So more to come. Mayor Easton.
Oh, is Councillor Regina next? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. Great report, and I think that you're doing a wonderful job of taking the mystery out of what do people in the Economic Development Department do. So let me just move to the future, because now that we know all the good things that have been going on and how successful they are, there's very much a message here, Mr. Chairman, about a healthy community. But we also have the Geopark coming along. There's a lot about the natural heritage. And so I would like to hear a little bit more how we see that being layered, because roundtable discussions, business walks, and surveys, they're extremely important, and I know that the businesses love them, no question about it. But are we going to actually get involved in doing research? Are we going to look at things like soil quality? Because without soil quality, you don't have a good fresh fruit market. Without a fresh fruit market, you lose all of that piece of your marketing. The sustainability of our natural features, and what can we say about that? What can we do about that in the future? And a lot of that has to do with our partnerships with VRIC, with the Conservation Authority, and I think that there's going to be more coming from the Niagara Escarpment Commission as well. How are we viewing marine activities? We have, I don't know how many kilometers we have of lakefront, but maybe with the changes that are being made at the Beacon, with our new park at Prudhome's, there's a whole lot of things that come along with that. which I think are going to have their moment now that you've got things so well in hand. But I am very interested in the research element of it, because without that, it will be difficult to move away from, not mundane is not a good word, but maybe what that traditional language will be or has been, and how we begin to move out into the future. I think you've done a great job. I'm so impressed, Mr. Chairman, to finally be able to pull out a few charts to be able to nail down where those businesses have grown. There's a great deal of pride in this for all of us, no question about it.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, and Chair, through you. So, Madam Mayor, we're going to do an extensive research and a lot of consultation when it comes to developing our new economic development strategy. And I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to steal our own thunder, but at the end of the day, everything's on the table. We're going to look at to see what our successes from the past 5 years have been and how do we build on that. And part of the reason why we're going to do it completely internally here amongst the three of us standing up in front of you this evening is because we have the bench strength to do just that. We don't need to go out and hire a consultant to tell us what we already know and what works in our community. So we're going to do this all in-house, and the idea being is how do we build on that strength and do some of the things that you just mentioned, reaching out to our important partners at VRIC, at the NPCA, at the NEC, and really identify how do we support agriculture, how do we support tourism, how do we support manufacturing. And there's different voices in our community that have different expertise on those topics, and we're going to tap into each of those. So more to come when we come back with more recommendations, Madam Mayor, but all good points.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly say that tomorrow night, Acting CEO Deanne and I are going to an event at Chateau de Charme. The town has been invited by Lisa Thompson, the Minister of Agriculture, and there's going to be maybe a half a dozen or more provinces that will be represented. Why were we asked? We were asked because of our value-add proposition. We were invited because of the relationship that we have around tourism and agriculture and the wine industry. And so we'll see what happens. We don't need to make a presentation. It's all about speaking to the ministers. We couldn't have this report at a better time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. Councillor Renchima.
Thank you, Chair Patriva, and I want to say some similar things to what others have said, but I sent you an email yesterday, Paul, when I was going through this report, and I said, it's a wonderful report, and it really, I've been on council 14 years, and I can remember a time when economic development was something that the region did, and we talked about, should we be doing this in-house, should we be doing this locally, and there was, it's a big thing to step into. And when we did, I honestly couldn't have imagined that it had turned out as well as it has. The three of you and whoever else, I don't want to ignore anybody, but you're a dynamic team and you've done so much, and it's really clearly laid out in here. And as the mayor said, when that question does come up, what does economic development do? Well, here, have a look. It's all really clear there. So I'm really glad that you put this report together. I have a question about, so we talked about the existing businesses that we know that are doing business in Lincoln, and that a lot we're aware that they're out there, partially because of word of mouth, partially because they come in for a building permit. In the future, we're planning to go and move into a business licensing process. Some people, when they hear that, they become afraid and they're not really sure what all that means. What does it mean to them? What kind of burden is it going to be on a business that's running in the community and doesn't really know what a license might do for them, as well as other than, so my question is going to be, how do we intend to, other than sharing en masse all the great work that's been done to date, that you've been doing on behalf of the business community, how do we have a way that we're going to encourage and sweeten the idea of developing a relationship with the town through a business licensing process?
So, Chair, through you to the councillor. Councillor, in terms of a business licensing system, as Mr. Rotz had indicated, if you're a new business coming to the community and, for example, you buy or rent a space in our community, and if you don't need a building permit or anything, you can just start operating because we don't have a business license. So obviously, if you're a food establishment, you need to come through us to go to the region to get a public health certificate. But if it's none of the above, you can start operating, and we'll only know because we drive by and you may see something. So the idea behind a business licensing system is really to provide us with data. Because if you come in for a business license, then you got to go through a little bit of an easy process that will make sure it's easy. And the idea is to just get a business license to be able to operate. Most municipalities in Niagara and most municipalities in Ontario do have a business licensing system. So how we're going to go about doing that is part of it is really baby steps, Councillor, because we are starting with our short-term accommodation and licensing regulatory framework that we are coming back to council later, obviously, in the near future with our final recommendations on that. The idea would be to take the successes of that and then see if we can transpose that to the rest of the businesses in our community. I'm fully cognizant of the fact that we don't want to create a bureaucratic red tape when it comes to businesses operating in our community. The idea would be a very short online process and a very cheap business license to make sure that we have the data to make informed decisions when it comes to supporting our businesses in our community.
Okay, so I guess I'm wondering if there's a plan to somehow make it clear what the advantages are to getting that license. And I mean, sharing, I guess, through the business newsletter that you do send out on a regular basis, and you've got 754 recipients. I'm assuming that those recipients well, obviously they're ones that we're aware of because they're receiving the newsletter. But for the people that are operating businesses, they don't receive the newsletter. Maybe they're not reading stuff online. They're not aware of everything that's in this report. Is there a way that we can somehow reach out to them through our social media channels and our communications to let existing businesses know that don't have a license, obviously, because there isn't one, but don't have some sort of a communication relationship with the town, the advantages of having a relationship with the town and the Economic Development Department?
So Chair, through to the councillor. So we're going to, we do have strong relationships with our existing businesses currently, Councillor, and we're going to make sure we build upon those strengths and those relationships. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but when the time does come to develop a little bit of a business licensing system, we're going to go through a whole process to make sure that our businesses are engaged. They identify and see the benefit of why we would put forward that recommendation to council. But I don't want to presuppose what council's decision would be to actually implement that type of system. But when the time comes, council, we're going to make sure we educate and engage with our businesses on that.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to congratulate you also on the role that you played pulling together the Chamber and the BIA and Civic Connect into one physical location. That's got to play a big part in increasing communication and avoid overlap in efforts that may have been happening over time. And I also want to congratulate you on the communication and collaboration that you've been undertaking with the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rinchma. Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to go back a little bit to tourism, so perhaps Ms. Basilewski could help me out with this. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Niagara Benchlands Destination Development Fund, just because it comes up at budget time and we're going to be asked to support it again. I'm assuming we are. And I wanted to know, it's a relatively small investment on our part, over 2 years, $42,500. Two-part question. Do you anticipate expanding that program? Do you see the demand from other tourism operators or businesses within the community to expand that? And are we gathering follow-up information to see specifically what is the return on this investment that we're getting? What are we seeing that's making a difference because we're investing these dollars?
Through you, Chair, to Deputy Mayor and Councillor Murray. First part to that question regarding expansion. We know the need in our community is quite great. This year we've had 19 applications be submitted, which unfortunately completely maxes out our in total overall fund. We won't be currently asking for an additional levy to be added from our operating to increase that fund. However, what we've been doing and what you'll see in this year's fund is we've adapted the objectives to meet what the current market demand is and where the gaps and needs are within our community. So initially when we brought the Benchlands Destination Development Fund online, for instance, it was all about helping to raise collaboration and destination awareness overall. So that was one of the major priorities of the fund. This year, for instance, noticing we have a gap in our seasonal product offerings for winter. We've encouraged applicants with a program priority objective to look for collaborative tourism development for new product during that season. So although not an increase in the total value of funds, we have ever so strategically migrated the key program objectives to help support the greatest need within the sector. Additionally, we are tracking KPIs against these applications. One of the things you're going to see in our July 15th report is some of those key indicators from our past applicants. So the projects that were awarded last year, you'll see KPIs on job creation for full-time and part-time employees. We'll be looking at overall increase in engagement based on the project initiative to promote the Benchlands overall, among some other key visitor engagement activities as well. What we're really interested about and being able to measure this, and we talked about it before, is our destination management plan that's coming online in Q4. This new project will actually allow us, what we don't have, is the other side to all that incredible lead generation we have to understand visitor spending with local businesses. It's data our team is dying to be able to advocate at multiple levels with AMO, Roma, when we're sitting at the table with our Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. These are the kind of indicators we need to ensure that we're getting the best value and creating the biggest impact within our community. So you'll see more of those KPIs coming online for our team to make informed decisions.
Excited to see them when they come out. Thank you very much, Brittany.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair Murray. Councillor McCulloch.
Thank you very much, Chair Patrick. Just through you for some clarification, I don't recall hearing anything about business licensing to date. I had a councillor made a motion to investigate this? Who's directed staff to look into this?
So Chair, through you to the councillor, it was it is something that we've talked about a little bit, councillor, in previous presentations and reports when it comes to our economic development strategy and how we can best serve our community. It's been in a line item in that, but it's not something that we've brought forward as a clear immediate interim priority or immediate priority, partially because we've recognized that we wanted to focus a little bit on the short-term accommodation licensing aspect of things, and then potentially down the road bring it forward and apply it to all businesses in Lincoln. So it's not something that we've been screaming from the rooftops, councillor, because it hasn't been an immediate priority, but it is something that we've talked about a little bit. But as previous to my previous answer, it's not something that we're going to presuppose that council would make a decision on, but we'd come forward with a recommendation.
Okay, I just don't know if it's something that is really on my radar that any businesses I've talked to are interested in at this time. It's just news to me. This is new to me. So, yeah, and I'm not sure how much staff time you're willing to dedicate or you're planning on dedicating towards that sort of initiative, knowing how much time was required with the business licensing that we're looking at with the short-term accommodation and the effort that's involved with that. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Chair, through you to councillor. So I don't want to presuppose what's going to be in our new economic development strategy, councillor. So we're going to do our research, we're going to do our outreach, and if it makes it on there as a recommendation, then so be it. Then it'd be up to the council. But again, I don't want to presuppose what's going to be in our new document.
Thank you, Acting CAO Deanne. Never assume, right? Excellent. Okay. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer. The committee receive and file for information report 8007-24 regarding Lincoln's economic development strategy, results, and next steps. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. Councillor Rajima?
In favor, Devan, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and thank you very much, Brittany, Cameron, and Mr. Deanne for that fabulous report. So, we have now concluded the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda for tonight. I will continue as Chair for the General Business and Finance Committee agenda in Chair Timmer's absence. We have no registered delegations for the General Business and Finance Committee this evening. We will now consider Report FN 08-24 regarding the 2024 Asset Management Plan Update, Non-Core Assets. Prior to the presentation, I will ask that committee proceed with a majority vote to request an extension for the presentation until completion. I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray. Actually, I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair Murray That committee extended presentation time regarding Report FN 0824, 2024 Asset Management Plan Update until completed. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote. Okay.
If you're okay, I'd like to do a show of hands. It's my systems.
Rose?
Yeah. And Councillor Rajima? Thank you, that carries.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will now hear from Associate Director of Public Works, Ms. Harris, Director of Community Services, Mrs. McKay, and the Manager of IT and Enterprise Services, Mrs. Bentley. Staff, please go ahead when you're ready. Floor is yours.
Oops, there we go. I pressed the wrong button. Nerves on the last day. Thank you very much, Councillor and Mary Easton and the remainder of Council. So we are happy to be here today to hit our the next milestone in Ontario Regulation 188. This deadline is for January 1st, 2024, and it's for the non-core assets and bringing forward kind of the base preliminary asset management plans for these, understanding that it's a work in progress in moving forward. So we'll bring them forward. I'll bring some kind of high-level information to you, and then we'll work through the 3 asset management plans that we're presenting, and then I'll have some closing comments. So can I do this? So the agenda, again, is to go over the non-core asset management plan, so the parks and facilities, fleet, enterprise services, or IT, and then we'll go over some questions and feedbacks. So tonight's objectives for the meeting, most importantly, is that there's not really any financial or operational impacts to approving the AMPs. A lot of it is tied within the provincial regulations, and then it drives more so that larger development of our programs, the mapping, defining what our levels of service are, and making sure that we're meeting those needs within there. The biggest part is the formalization of these plans are required to be eligible to to apply for provincial and federal grants. The next round of the AMP is the larger financial portion, so that provides the final projected levels of service that are required, and then the financial requirements to support those for not only kind of that upcoming year, but also the 10 years coming forward to that. So that will be a report that will be brought forward with an overall corporate asset management plan, updating of the core AMPs as well, and incorporating some of the information from these AMPs, and that will be for July 1st, 2025. I just do want to make that note as we're going forward. So for a quick overview of some of the information that we would have provided with our last, for our core asset management plan. So the internal governance or ownership of the asset management plans is Council and SMT or corporate leadership team. Charlotte, the Director of Finance, is the champion for the corporate leadership team. Then we have a larger asset management committee. I've been the chair, Vice Chair, Kate has stepped in right now, and then also cross-functional representatives. So we have everyone from fire and emergency services, enterprise services, parks and open spaces, engineering, finance, planning, and fleet and operations. And that group working together provides that internal governance and the ownership within the documents. So the asset management integration, a lot of items do go into the asset management plan when we're reviewing it. So we look at that overall community vision, what the strat plan is, official plans, corporate goals and objectives, and then we also have all of our other, all the other individual departments, their performance, larger plans and whatnot, and then all of that goes into your asset management strategy. And coming out from that standpoint. And then these asset management plans then feed into other larger plans, so our financial plans, master servicing plans when they may come into play, and then that climate adaptation mitigation plan. So I do want to note that those columns on the right side, those two tend to go back and forth. They tend to feed each other as we're going, because all of them are iterative processes. So they're all not meant to be kind of put onto a shelf and left there. They're all meant to be working documents that you continually update, and they feed back and forth into each other as we do the updates. So going over kind of council's roles and responsibilities as we go, we would want to bring forward what our proposed levels of service are and have those discussions, and making sure that those are met. Also, we present kind of where we are right now, and within these, we're presenting what our proposed levels of services are, making sure that there's also resource allocation as we go through that larger budget process, not necessarily a decision to be made today, but something that kind of comes in, again, through that working document, through the budget process, and then why we need to kind of keep council informed, the staff, and to set the direction is really that asset performance, the level of risk that you're comfortable with, and then the costs that are associated with maintaining that asset performance, the level of service, and the risk, all going hand in hand. So the following is the agenda that each the three individual asset management plans are going to go through. They'll all follow the same format for kind of ease of going through and continuity. I do want to note, as we're going through these, and I've said it a couple times, but it's meant to be a working document. So all these AMPs, they're a snapshot of time. So they're not necessarily a snapshot of time today. They're a snapshot of time of when we would have had to pull together that information and then actually go through that whole process of analyzing the data, bringing that forward, doing the reviews of our risk and our levels of service and all of that standpoint. So it's a snapshot of time previously. That's just the one thing to note, but it will be a working document. And as we go through the budget process, we look at certain items, and then every 5 years we do a large update to the asset management plan, but we do iterative processes throughout. Again, the AMPs are to meet regulations and are required, again, for maintaining and awarding future grants. And the data isn't, with that snapshot, the data is not always perfect, and that's where the big thing of the opportunities for improvements, and each of these kind of go through with that continuous enhancements. We had that within the core asset management plans that were brought forward. We've been working diligently through those, and we've actually knocked off a number of items that were raised through that and are going to be key feeds into the deadline that's next year. So when we go through, we really want to focus on the levels of service and the overall assets that we're going to be discussing and bring forward, and also just to educate the public as they're watching this of just actually how many assets the town really has. I'm sure that a lot of people aren't aware of how many assets we really have within this. And again, in July 2025, we're going to be bringing forward that larger review, which will also incorporate the remap that we've been working on following the budget process last year. So with that, I will pass it on to Director McKay to go over the parks and facilities. Yep.
Thank you. Good evening, Mary Easton, members of council, chair. Just to start on this slide, I'm going to do a few introductory remarks. So as stewards of our public spaces, we are entrusted with the responsibility to ensure that our parks, recreational areas, and public facilities are well-maintained, sustainable, and accessible to all. Our parks and facilities are not just physical spaces. They're the heart of our community, places where families gather, children play, and residents of all ages find recreation, respite, and a sense of belonging. The plan before you is really, as Jillian introduced, the beginning. It's a starting point of comprehensive planning and strategy to manage and enhance these vital assets. This plan is the result of extensive time and is a collaborative effort among various stakeholders. It reflects an important commitment to preserving the beauty and functionality of our public spaces while adapting to the evolving needs of our community. Oh, sorry, I think I went the wrong way. I did. So, what we own. This looks to be a simple list, but when you look at how these assets break down, it's not so simple. Asset classes are complex, and what we've learned in going through this process is parks are not as standardized as others, such as buildings. So buildings are the substructures, the shell, the interiors, the services, the equipment and furnishings, and the building site. Parks are our parks, pathways, trails, flower beds. Cemeteries, you'll see there are 5. They're the active cemeteries. Playing fields, again, not just the basketball, baseball, soccer, tennis, pickleball, but all the related assets that go along with those sports. Our comfort and picnic assets include barbecues, picnic shelters, benches, comfort station, tables, waste, bike racks. Recreational parks is distinguished by those parks that actually have the playgrounds in them, and includes the skate park, the pump track, the bicycle playground. Pools are not just pools, they're pools and splash pads. Parking are both the parking lots and the spaces, and the bridges, a little bit easier, the 3 pedestrian bridges. So in going through this exercise and in working with our consultant, we did talk about, generally speaking, that across organizations and municipalities, for parks specifically, a better hierarchy is needed. So hopefully over time, that will also happen. What does it cost? So when we look at this slide, you'll see that's where the numbers don't seem to align. You look and go, we don't have 141 buildings, or we don't have 130 parks, but the clarification in the previous slide helps that, hopefully. On the cemetery side, this is one area that people might look at and say, well, this is alarming. It's very poor. In this case, it was age versus useful life that was used. And really what we're talking about and still talking about with the consultants is cemeteries don't have a useful life. They are maintained in perpetuity. So looking at what that year should be is something that we're going to be going through and continuing to go through with our consultant. On the next slide, you'll see that there's a comment about the majority of our assets are in fair to good. And if you were to sit here and say, well, I counted up all the poor and I counted up all the very poor, and there look to be more poor and very poor than there are fair and good, this was based on the cost. So if you look at the total cost, the fair to good are the higher of the costs at almost 110 million. So that's the difference there in the qualifier. And buildings have the greatest value. There's a weighted value based on replacement costs. It's not pure numbers. So taking you to that next slide, that's what you'll see here. And the range of assets being from 0 to 60. As we move on to levels of service, the levels of service for the parks and facilities are based on the following service criteria. What we aim to provide is that our spaces are usable, they're clean, they're safe, they're accessible, and they're available. And when we say available, we mean as our community grows, the demand for park assets, park amenities also grows. So do we have enough available? So I won't go through line by line by line. What I will explain on these levels of service and the state of infrastructure statements is that we do the best we can right now with the information that we have. So I can tell you that in the last 6 years, we have gone leaps and bounds with SOPs, with data, with inspections, and all of that information is really good information that has gotten to the consultant. The recently completed BCAs that were done, that information, those BCAs were given to the consultant. Where we're a bit challenged is some of that historical. Where we're also challenged are the integrated systems. So having a work order system as an example that starts right at the work request, where you can actually start tracking an asset. So as you know, as councillors, sometimes we get requests, work requests, or complaints about assets or parks or spaces through you. Sometimes we get them via our general inquiries. Sometimes we get them by email. So there isn't a integrated system, if you will, to track the request, the individual unique asset, and then as we do work on that asset or as we repair that asset. So that's where some of the challenges are. But generally, I think when you look at this and you see that the customer and the council focused performance measures are focused around those clean and those safe and those accessible and those available, that's what's really important. That's what we're hearing. As we move to systems that are more integrated, the technical focused performance measures or KPIs will be easier to report on and track because we'll have that data and it will all be integrated. So again, safe, well-maintained, accessible, looking at priorities related to AODA, our priority 1, 2, 3 sites. As we're gathering information, we're putting it into basic systems now, not integrated systems, basic systems, but the level of reporting is limited. And this is as Jillian alluded to, this is a great starting point for us to really have eyes wide open and see where we are at and where we need to go. So risk analysis is calculated by multiplying a consequence of failure by the likelihood of failure. And that's where we come up with risk analysis. The majority of the risk related to the public parks and facilities is in the medium. And some, this is just some, this is not all of our mitigation efforts, are around improving and expanding our capital budget process. So with this information, we need to remap against capital budget. And with this information, things might move. If a park we saw being developed was happening 5 years out, but there's necessity for a different capital project because of the priority, that's what we'll be doing. And that's what we do right now. Monitoring AODA legislation, so that changes. It won't come as a surprise that we have lots of old buildings and facilities, and whether or not, to what degree you invest, or if you're going to divest of those properties. And then monitoring for severe weather events. So when we think about warming and cooling, and maybe needing to be open beyond our regular hours of operation, when we think about our splash pads, maybe starting up earlier, staying open later in a season. We think about what happened down at Charles Daly Park with boardwalk flooding and erosion and things that happen. These are real risks and concerns. So, before I move on, this is an overview of existing assets and their condition and the challenges we face. It is really important to note that the state of infrastructure is based, as Jillian introduced, currently available inventory data, which is sourced from a variety of sources. But because our assets are all not each uniquely identified, they have been rolled up. So if we know we have 75 benches, we roll those up and we apply a value to them. And so they've largely been reported on average condition, age, year installed, if we had that information for each of the assets. And it really allows for that baseline status of infrastructure, the baseline of the state of infrastructure with an aim to improve. So going on to the 10-year expenditure and funding forecast, some of the largest are, of course, our larger capital projects that we have planned. And then we will be doing that remapping exercise for the capital plan. 100-year renewal forecast, the 5-year average of 4.7, 20-year average of 4.5, and 100-year average of 4. And there's just a note about the budget timing could be off, and I don't know if Charlotte will speak to that after. Then on to our forecast operating costs have been estimated by using a 3% increase per annum calculation. And we did, when we were talking about, that's sort of 3% across the board, but when we start talking about where things might go, we don't know if 3% will be enough. So every year you look at that, and where you have to adjust, you'll adjust. When we look at the comparison of budget to forecast, the 10-year average annual capital replacements are 6.21, forecasted 10-year, that was planned budget, forecasted 10-year based on needs-based is a little bit lower at 4.64. I think I said that wrong, that was 6.21, sorry. And an annual funding gap of 1.57. So continued enhancement highlights, develop a structured process for long-term budgeting decisions, continue to review and update replacement costs, and not being the only municipality to do these plans, because we all need to do these plans, we learn a lot from others as well. Separating group assets and assigning unique identifiers, and resolving gaps in resource requirements to ensure the levels of service can be consistently met. So if we're cutting grass more often, that's going to be more resources, both on the human side and the equipment side. If we're staying open longer, again, more resources that are needed in our facilities. So just in wrapping up and closing remarks for community services, The plan is integral to our vision for the future and the goals we aim to achieve in the coming years. It is not just a living document that it will evolve. It is a roadmap to a future where our parks and facilities continue to enrich the lives of residents. It's a dynamic strategy that will evolve with the input from the community and advancements in technology and best practices. And now I will turn it over to Alex. Oh, sorry. Jillian, back to Jillian.
Thank you, Shannon. Up next will be our fleet asset management plan. So the fleet asset management plan covers all fleets. So this is what you typically see on there and what people think about, whether it be trucks or cars or that sort of things. But it also includes our equipment that we have. So whether it's our smaller ones, snow blowers to a certain point would be included as well. We do have a capital threshold point, but it does include some of that smaller equipment within it. So when you do see the fleet assets, so I should note as well, it's all fleet with the exception of fire. You may recall that with the core assets that we delivered, fire also provided their asset management plan. So their trucks and some of their core or some of their fleet within that department are included within that budget. So this is all town fleet with the exception of fire. So what do we own? So it's 103 assets within this, broken up from heavy duty all the way down to capital equipment. So heavy duty would be more like the large plow trucks. Some of these, when you add on, would be including kind of the blade or the that assembly that adds up some of our numbers, and then some of the larger tractors that we'd have as well that would be used through community services. And then medium duty also has some equipment from that perspective, and then these are more pickup trucks that would fit within. That light duty would be more of like SUVs and cars, and then capital equipment sliding into some of our smaller equipment. So I do want to note that these assets, while we assign it to a specific department, there are a number that, depending on the season, might be transferred back and forth. So that's commonly seen within the community services group. And then the roads service, we do see those moving back and forth. We might see some of the technical services equipment being used by some of the other groups and vice versa. So I do want to note that about what we own. What does it cost? So we're just shy of $10 million using 2023 dollars. So the fleet is in generally good shape. I do want to note that what we're looking at here is we are showing a 15-year expected life. When we were going through the process, and as we've done a good job of and council supporting the motions through these of replacing and refreshing some of our fleet. It's in good shape, and we have a well thought out maintenance program. So assuming that we maintain that operating budget and provide the appropriate means to maintain that levels of service, we felt that it was reasonable to extend what had typically been a 10-year average life expectancy and replacement strategy to actually expand that out to 15 with that, assuming that we had that appropriate operating budget, which is around where we are now. We are very close to that. So I did want to note that. So you will see kind of an extended from previous asset management plans or previous reports that had come forward that had used a 10-year period. We have moved forward with a 15 within this one. And a number of the poor assets that are flagged, those are some of the older ones, and we've had, this was a snapshot, we pulled our data in late 2023. Some of these assets have actually been replaced or are almost on the way here. We are, sad to say, finally getting some of our equipment that we ordered in 2020, but we're happy to have those, but so they are showing some of our older fleet within there, which is bringing down our average condition, but is within our next iteration that we go through will show a significant improvement when those come into place. So this, again, going to the overall condition of the assessment. So this very poor section, or the poor section, a lot of them are tied to those older fleet, and we will start to see that profile turn more green and yellow as we're moving forward. And then, as I said, with our as we are able to do some enhancements within our data and do our own internal condition assessments rather than purely age-based, I think we'll get some improvements over that. So our levels of service, some of them are mandated, some of them are more open to interpretation. So as most of the AMPs we cover, all the items shown on this. So I'll go through kind of some of the key levels of service within the fleet asset management plan. On this slide, I want to draw attention to percent meeting the replacement schedule within the useful life. So our current is 87%, 95. These are I think, again, going back to a lot of this has been tied to the actual delivery schedules that we've had. So moving forward with our remapping, the consideration with the 15-year plan, and assuming that supply chains get better, we should be well within that getting closer to that target point. If we do fall below, this is the line as well that would impact, if we're falling behind, we would just need some additional operating budget to manage some of the older fleet. And it's that balance from that perspective as we move forward of whether or not it's in capital to operating. So then on this one, wanting to bring forward kind of some of the targets that we're not necessarily meeting. So the percent of unmet service needs, so we were at 3%. We obviously want to be able to meet all service needs, so we want it to be at 0. This was tied to the inability to obtain inventory or major delays in inventory. We are finally starting to see some improvements within that, but there are still some delays, or some of our older equipment that we're waiting on full replacements, we actually can't get some parts for. So luckily we have a fantastic mechanics team that are very good at making things work as we need it to kind of Band-Aid along, but we are having to do that in a couple situations. And then for the percent of complaints due to fleet availability, that really comes into the summer months when the increased demands, and this goes to Director McKay's comments about obviously with levels of service, right? If weather comes in or at a point, you can drive along go near any of our open spaces, go along the roads, the grass is high. We're trying to come up with that and meet that. We're going to have we're just going to need some additional fleet to handle that. So we typically see us not hitting the fleet availability during the summer months because of the increased demands during those. And then on this slide, for the good stewardship, the percentage of vehicles within age being less than the expected service lives, again, this is tied to, we're going to see this increase when we do the next iteration, once we actually have those vehicles that have been ordered and we're waiting on supply for those to actually be delivered to us, we'll start to see those going up. And then on this slide, we're in great shape. We ideally want to be below that 10% for the target for the percent difference for available budgets and condition. And one of the nice things that we did find, and you'll see as we go through the rest of this, is that we are, it's nice to see we are in a decent spot within the fleet portion of the asset management plan. So the risk analysis that was completed, as Director McKay was alluding to, over the overall point, the majority of our risks are low or medium within this. Again, going back to what ours were, high risks are tied to supply chain issues. Lack of supply with some outdated equipment or specialized equipment, just difficulty getting those resources. And then some of these results have required more resources to complete the work or deliver the services, so that's part of it. And then as we get those outstanding items that we've already ordered in, you'll start to see some of those risks going down. So our capital revenue forecast, this is not remapped. This is not based off of our remapping. So it is, before that, that's what that note is about. The AMP may vary from 2024 budget due to timing differences. We provided the information to the consultant in 2023, so this is using that previous information. So it's not exactly what you'll see in the 2024 budget, but again, a snapshot for a work in progress. This is what we were looking at for the overall program. Again, we try to keep the fleet budget relatively stable across and aim to kind of be around that point and to stabilize it versus some of the peaks and valleys that we would have seen in the past. So our 5-year average is around $644,000, 25-year average is around $720,000, and then 100-year average is $724,000. So these do take into account some inflation, so you'll see that going up over the years. But again, trying to balance this out. And then this does the forecast based off of age. So it doesn't include what our typical map out is, but incorporates based off of age of a truck, hits at point, they would be logged on this within that year. So our operating forecast, as I was noting, was in good shape, like all of the other AMPs, and this is standard across the industry, is to, if you're comfortable or at a point with what your current operating budget is, to just apply the 3%. Where we will have to see some fluctuations is, again, if there's delays in getting some of our new equipment, if we have to make some hard decisions with budgets and move or defer some fleet purchases, we might have to increase or do 1-year increases for maintenance of some of the older fleet, just because, as we know, caring for our own cars, right, if you if you keep the car a little bit longer, you'll end up having to do brakes or tires or some of those other things. So that's where it comes into place for this operating forecast. So as I was noting, we were generally happy with where this is. Some of when we went through the core, it was a significantly larger infrastructure gap. So it's nice to see within this one, we're in the right ballpark for what current replacement budgets have been in that past period, and then what the 10-year average is. So it's only about, if we were to kind of sit with where we've been within the past little bit for our consistent annual expenditures, we're in that similar range. So we're just shy of $50,000 for an infrastructure funding gap. So our continued enhancements and highlights, and I think that this will really help out with even our expanding our life a little of our assets a little bit longer to kind of leverage out and smooth out what that infrastructure gap is really getting that data collection and developing a means to do condition assessments in-house and evaluate it based off of overall condition rather than age. We do this in practice. If you go back there, we have some fleet that is significantly older than what we would typically have in age, but it's in great shape. So we continue using it. It's not requiring a lot of maintenance. That's another trigger that we have. So keep them running and defer any larger capital investments that we might need to make. So trying to formalize a process with that, review the levels of service statement to ensuring that we're in alignment with the overall strategic goals and then our internal stakeholder expectations, developing data standards, and then developing a workflow to keep all the information current in the asset management software that we have. And we're already working on this behind the scenes so that when we go through the 10-year capital plan, and the intent is to be able to leverage this as we're going to help council make decisions during the budget year so that we can present the financial and the level of service information to you. So some of our pressures that we're going to have is, again, we're been saying this for a few years now, but just being one of the fastest growing municipalities, with growth comes increased demands and also increased assets. So that's one of the things that we're keeping an eye on of our mechanic team is fantastic, but can they handle what's done? We try to do as much as possible in-house because it definitely saves money. It's more cost efficient from that perspective. So what is that trigger to look at possibly needing an additional mechanic on hand to balance out what needs to be sent out? Climate change impacts will adjust how we're maintaining and operating, and can take a toll on our equipment, especially as we start to see more of the freeze thaw, as we start to see the ice conditions. All of that starts to take more of a hit on not only our fleet but also the fleet of all of our residents. So we want to keep that in mind and for maintenance. And then the things to consider beyond the 10 years. So reviewing those levels of service, adjusting as required, and continuing from that point. So with that, I will pass it off to Alex this time to go over the Enterprise Services Management Plan.
Good evening, Mayor Easton, members of council. The Enterprise Services Asset Management Plan encompasses all of the IT hardware and software that is owned by the town. So this is a snapshot from 2023. It shows our assets divided into two groups. We have end user devices, so that's the equipment that our staff use to do their work. And then we have our infrastructure assets. And these are the assets or devices that run our backbone of our network and our core systems. So when we're looking at IT assets, we do use end of useful life that is age-based. With IT assets, that's the most reliable way to assess condition. And then the condition is based on where that asset is in the end of useful life cycle. When we're looking at how much it costs, these numbers are based on the dollar value it would be to replace the equipment in 2023 for assets that are not scheduled to be replaced in 2023, a 3% annual average has been used to determine an estimated replacement cost. So that information is really important for us to review in terms of our levels of service. The levels of service for enterprise services assets are based on quality and reliability, availability, compliance, good stewardship, and affordability. So when we look at quality and reliability, our target is to have 55% of our IT equipment in fair or better condition. We are currently slightly below that. However, we do have a number of hardware refreshes that were budgeted for 2024, and we are currently working through, so we anticipate that that number will be better by the end of this year. And another important factor in our level of service is the support and maintenance of the assets. We don't necessarily have a target for that, but we measure that metric by our ticketing system. So in 2023, the Enterprise Services Department completed 5,384 tickets. That work is primarily split between 3 roles, and so that averages out to about 50 to 55 tickets a week per technician. In terms of our availability, making sure that our systems are up and running, our service level agreement states 99.9%, which we are meeting. So we are actually meeting our service level agreement numbers, but we would really like to outperform in this area. So we're targeting 99.92% uptime. As for compliance, having this asset management plan completed would meet our Ontario regulation requirements. And then in terms of affordability and good stewardship, the department spends a lot of time and effort sourcing good quality, affordable equipment and maintaining that equipment to ensure that we are being good stewards of and providing efficient use of taxpayer dollars. So when we take a look at the condition of our assets, with IT assets, the age of the asset is a really key indicator in the condition that they're in. From this chart, you'll see blue is end user devices, orange is infrastructure. The majority of our assets are in the 0 to 5 year range, which is good, but we do have a number of assets that have expired. They have gone beyond the expected service life and are scheduled to be replaced. And then we do have some of our infrastructure, primarily infrastructure assets, that have quite a bit of life left to them. As you can see from the pie graph here, that just sort of better illustrates the 49% in very good to good, and the 49% as opposed to the 55% that we're targeting. So when we look at IT assets, aside from the risk of assets being out of life or end of support, 2 other major risks that we have to factor in are climate change and cybersecurity. A lot of work has been done to mitigate those risks, and so we are reporting that the majority of those risks are low to medium. However, maintaining that low to medium risk rating does require continual monitoring and potentially additional investments. So when we look at our 10-year asset renewal, this again is based on our end of useful life for our capital assets, blue being end user devices, orange being infrastructure. We can plan out where we're going to see some increases. There is a backlog. Some of that is assets that we currently have that we haven't replaced yet. And then you can see in certain calendar years, we're anticipating a much larger spike. So this helps us to plan so that we know what our budget asks may be in certain years, and we can plan for the work that needs to be done. For example, in 2029, you'll see a large spike in end user devices. That's because our radios are coming due for renewal. 2031, that's a large spike in infrastructure. That's things on our server side. In terms of our operating forecast, the Enterprise Services operating budget is primarily comprised of IT staff costs, all of our internet and phone services, and our software subscriptions. We've averaged out our software subscription renewals at 5%. Unfortunately, a lot of our licensing has moved from perpetual license to annual subscriptions, and we are seeing higher renewals coming in. Some of our renewals have come in at 10 to 12%. So although this is a good indication of what our operating budget forecast needs will be, we may need to adjust those numbers moving forward if that's an ongoing trend. And so in terms of the Enterprise Services Department, as was mentioned, Lincoln is one of the fastest growing municipalities. And so as the municipality grows, there may be additional requirements for assets. Climate change is a risk that is very real for IT. IT equipment is sensitive to sudden losses of power and extreme temperatures. So additional efforts may need to be made to maintain the spaces that host that equipment. And then going forward in the next 10 years and beyond, looking at our current levels of service and our abilities to meet them. So that's the Enterprise Services AMP, and I'll turn it back to Jillian.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. So what does it really mean as we've gone through these past three asset management plans? One of the key questions, not only for council but also for the community, is really to have that understanding of what is the state of the infrastructure within the town and the larger community. How well are we meeting the community's expectation? What are the key asset deficiencies and risks? What are the priorities for improvements? And what is the plan to maximize the life cycle of the assets in a fiscally sustainable way? So I think all of these roll into even when Paul's team sends out the surveys during the budget time, right? So when you're thinking about what you're looking at, the residents can then also refer back to some of our asset management plans. Maybe they want some nice bedtime reading, but they could review that information and kind of get that snapshot of it. And it's really getting that story out there that at times it may seem some doom and gloom in some things, but we also have some good news stories that were coming out of these asset management plans, that things aren't necessarily as bad as they are, or we're in great shape and good things are coming. We have things managed. We're thinking about growth. We're thinking about climate change. We're thinking about different needs or different requirements from our residents as their priorities change, and going through and taking those into account as we go through those asset management plans. So these are the larger questions for council and the community to have, not only at this time when we present the asset management plans, but as we move forward and as we review budgets and as we review projects and those 10-year capital plans and those larger master planning processes that we go through, and how it all ties back to that asset management. So again, recap of tonight's objectives. So that approving the asset management plans, again, key to meet that regulation to maintain and apply for our provincial and federal grants. It is a requirement, but again, also knowing that the intent of the regulation is to have a plan in place with continuous improvement moving forward. So staff that have been working on these are actively involved within the asset management community across municipalities. I can say confidently that the town of Lincoln is in great shape in our overall maturity of our asset management plans and our comfort level and where our data is, and that will only continue to improve. And as we noted, kind of going through with those larger updates. July 2025, we're going to be bringing that next update that has what are the town's projected levels of service across all of our assets, and then what are the financial requirements to maintain those projected levels of service from not only an operation but also a capital, and looking at that larger 10-year plan. So that's why behind the scenes that larger 10-year mapping is important as well. And then also enhancing the data that have been coming out of the core infrastructure, and as was presented through the other two asset management plans, why having those other systems in place, the integrated systems, and getting that larger data going in to feed in the updates are really important as we go through that July 2025 update and then the ones moving forward. And then again, the AMPs are from a snapshot in time, so some of them might not incorporate some of the remapping that was done in advance of the 2024 budget, or the remapping that's currently going on behind the scenes. And it might be based off of assets that weren't necessarily renewed at the time that the data was collected. So going back to the two overall comments, and so that the public is aware, our asset management plans will be posted to our website. The cores are currently posted, so we do have an asset management plan page, and you can even go in and type in the search bar the asset management plans. So following any approval of updates to asset management plans, these would then be added to the website, so the public can access these and go through larger, more in detail than having to go through necessarily go through the council or the COW agendas and pulling out the reports from there. So we will make them readily available for those to the general public as well. So with that, thank you very much for your time and allowing us to go a little bit longer with our presentation. And if you have any questions, we will be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much, Jillian, Shannon, and Alex. Members of the committee have any questions? I'm pleased to see that we were able to go up in the life cycle costing of vehicles, because that's something I have been clamoring for since I was elected, so I love to see that. Councilor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I love that you broke it out to the three appendixes, so we could clearly see everything there through the three appendixes. So I wanted to concentrate at the beginning on the facilities and the parks. So on page 11, the table 4, that we currently, our assets replacement cost is around 131 million. So I think you guys did a really good job of describing that this is a moving target. Jillian, you couldn't have hit the nail on the head any better when you say all of us around the council chambers, including the mayor, we hear from different people at various sectors as the year unfolds, as our term unfolds. Someone might be talking about cemeteries, another person's talking about the Jordan Arena, another person's talking about, well, why don't you build an indoor pool? So everybody's got something to say. But when I look at this chart, what resonates to me is how does staff, we look at it from a lens of council because we hear and we're taxpayers, but from a staff perspective, it really jumps out to me. For instance, when I look at what in this chart is very poor, the only thing that our asset management at this point in time is saying is poor is our cemeteries. But it's only quantifying 5, and we know we have more than 5 cemeteries, within Lincoln. Some of them aren't under our jurisdiction, but we're still maintaining them. But I guess what I'm interested is from a staff perspective, Director McKay, is as we go into budget, how do you prioritize what you're going to bring back to council and talk to council about when, we've got $4 million worth of very poor cemeteries, but we've got, and the average life cycle is way beyond 33 is the expected life cycle, and we're at 51. And then, for instance, as an example, we've got 130 parks at 14 million that are fair. So what's, I just find it fascinating as to how you look at this when something is poor and something is fair, but yet there's such a wide diversity in quantities and in dollar values.
Through the chair to the councillor. So back to the earlier comments about cemeteries. Cemeteries shouldn't be poor. They're not rating the condition of our cemeteries with that. They are looking at age. And what they're saying is the average expected useful life of a cemetery is 33 years and ours are 51, therefore it's poor. But cemeteries don't have a useful life. They are in perpetuity, and that is something that when the report was done, we started having deep discussions with the consultants about, and they actually said, yeah, we should do an amendment to that, because if you look at other asset management plans that address cemeteries, because they are in perpetuity, they don't base it on an age. And so the only reason you're seeing a very poor beside cemeteries is specific to the calculation done on age. To your question about how do we prioritize, we prioritize based on council's priorities, based on what we're hearing from the public, which would have been gathered and documented in our Parks and Rec and Culture Master Plan, on our discussions around corporate leadership team meetings. Last year, the direction was legislated in health and safety. So what came forward as far as capital asks from community services were that. And that's why the 3 pedestrian bridges are being addressed, and we're going out for detailed design this year. So it is confusing to look at. Some of them are pure numbers of, yes, we have 5 active cemeteries, and you're right, we have a number of inactive cemeteries. and we have 3 bridges, and those are true numbers to what those assets are. But then when you start looking at the buildings and the playing fields, which includes not just the field, but the lights and the benches and the nets and the things related to those playing fields, those are included in those numbers. So it doesn't mean that 102 of those assets are poor. And the other thing we were talking about with the consultants is you might have 3 bridges that each have a different replacement value. And because the bridge with the higher replacement value is poor, but the 2 bridges with the lower are in fair or in good, the value, because it's a higher value to replace that, could pull it down to a poor. So that's also why we've seen that we're in fair to good, is because the higher value for our building condition and our building assets are higher. So there's no easy algorithm or formula that we use as staff, but we have a lot of discussions with corporate leadership team, with the CAO, and through what we hear from council, and align to strategic priorities when we decide to bring back a capital ask and make a business case for it. And you know, you've heard us talk about, you know, last year why we had to replace the chiller in Jordan Arena, because we would run the risk of not being able to open that facility. So that's how we prioritize. There'll always be assets in all of these that are being replaced. And as I said, hopefully as we go forward and we refine this and we get better data as well, we will improve on how we're doing them. But we have to roll up assets right now, is what we're doing in a lot of our park area.
Okay, I respect that response, but I think what Jillian said really resonated with me is, you know, when we go into budget and we do these surveys on what's important, you know, to our residents, we hear everything under the rainbow, and you're absolutely right. It is a moving target, and you know, I look at all these assets and I just go, you know, you can't keep everybody happy, and I don't know how we collectively can look at this asset management. But I look forward to this information as it flushes out. I think you said July, next year, July 2025. So yeah, we'll miss this budget process. But appreciate the report. I have a bunch of other questions, but I'll just hold on to them.
Thank you, Councillor Brunet. And in a positive, though, they're in a positive over budget, right? Your capital replacement, your planned budget, as opposed to your infrastructure analysis, you're in a positive, which is a good sign going forward. So, Councillor Renchima.
Thank you, Chair Patriva, and thank you for the presentation, all of you, all 3 of you. My question is related to Alex's portion about enterprise services. On slide number 45, you talked about majority of the risks are low to medium. The high risks are related to security and climate change. So my question is about cybersecurity particularly. It says on the slide that the continual monitoring required and that there's a need to invest in robust cybersecurity measures. So recognizing that a very big advantage of doing these asset management plans is to monitor and track our assets and the related risk and to plan for investments wisely. I see that everyone would have learned quite a bit going through this process. So my question is, and this might be a big question for you, in terms of risk, in terms of cybersecurity and risk, are we at a point where we can present it as a percentage, for example? If 100% is we are safe from cybersecurity, where would we lie in that percentage? I know that Hamilton has gone through quite a bit, and I think still going through quite a bit about 3 weeks ago, I stopped at the library in Hamilton to print something off, and I couldn't do anything digitally. All you could do is go read books. They were still shut down. And I think that was 6 or 7 weeks into their attack. So my question is twofold. Do we know enough to be able to present it in terms of a percentage, in terms of how safe we feel from cybersecurity attacks? And I'm assuming we'll see an ask for investments to protect us from cybersecurity attacks in the future. And do you know anything about what that might look like?
Through you, Chair, to the councillor. So in terms of cybersecurity risks, we've have that listed as a high risk, and that will likely always remain a high risk because there is no way to ensure 100% that we're safe. We have put a lot of measures in place to protect us against risks. For obvious reasons, we can't discuss those openly. But if we were trying to look at a percentage, that would be a very difficult number to come up with because it is a constantly moving target. You don't have to look very far in the news to see new evidence of cyber risks. New ransomware is coming out every day. With AI, cybersecurity risks are growing exponentially. And so because it is an ever-moving target that changes on a daily basis, and because it is a risk that we can never 100% protect against, it will always remain a high risk. And it would, I think, be counterintuitive to put a percentage on it because I wouldn't want us to feel secure and to stop moving forward in ongoing efforts to protect our network and our data. In terms of investments in cybersecurity, actually we already budgeted for those for 2024. So those there's not an additional investment requirement or ask. We are just moving forward with our ongoing, already planned measures that we had planned for this year.
Okay, that helps. So I guess if I was to phrase it that, if we were 100% would mean that we're doing everything that we can, and 100% means that we have all the tools that we need. Do you feel that we're there if we include the 2024 investment? Another tough question.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, I don't know that I would be comfortable putting a percentage. I can tell you confidently that we have put significant measures in place. We have followed all of the industry best practices, and we have put things in place based on lessons learned from other organizations who have had cyber incidents. So I am confident in the efforts that we have put in, but I don't feel comfortable putting a percentage to it. There isn't any security risks that we are aware of at the moment.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that you feel that you're supported in terms of getting all the investment that's required, because obviously the consequences are huge and dire. So that was my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Majima. Acting CAO Deanne, do you have a few words to add?
I do. Thank you, Chair. And Councillor, in regards to some of the answers to your questions, if you did want some more detailed responses into some of those questions, I would be happy to look to the Chair and maybe our clerk to see if we need to go into a closed session for those. But I am confident in the responses that Alex did provide. And again, if you want some more detailed answers, I would look to the Chair and clerk if we need to go into closed session, but I don't think it's required at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Deanne. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Patriva, through you to the presenters. There's a lot to digest here. This is 50 slides. There's a lot of data and information, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. Question I have is, we're going to a 15-year cycle instead of a 10 by looks of it, and we're in the condition that we're in now, currently. What what are things going to look like in 15 years when we're doing this same sort of analysis? Is it going to be as good, or is there going to be more concern?
Through your chair, I think that's the beauty of the asset management plan. It's meant to be a guiding document as we go through the process. So as much as the regulations may require a 10-year, as you start looking at 15-year projections from that point, it's meant to be an iterative process. So every year as we're going through and we're updating assets, we should be updating our asset registers and replacements and having that greater idea of that snapshot of what our pressures are. And working with, all the departments should be working with finance and working with council when we're going through that budget to really show what that looks like and to remap as required or to make some adjustments based off of not only our asset needs, but also our community needs and what some of those drivers are. I'm sure that Charlotte, she has her hands up and would be happy to answer from that perspective, but I think that's really what, and she might say this, is what that next deliverable that we have. And I should note as well that our growth has put us into this next deliverable requirement, which is great for council to have and for the public to be able to see. So we've just moved into requiring this next iteration, but that really is laying out that groundwork of what is that larger picture looking like to meet and maintain your projected levels of service and the financial requirements associated with that to make sure that you are cost efficient and sustainable as you move through. So I'll pass it on to Charlotte to answer anything else.
Through you, Chair. I just wanted to add that I think an important part of the asset management plan is it also talks about operating costs. And part of what we've been trying to address through the budget was even in the 2024 budget, we had a fairly significant increase in what we were putting towards capital. So in part, that's how we address the long term, is by building up the baseline amount that we're putting into our capital program in an ongoing basis. And then that starts to take care of the future for itself.
I appreciate that. And I like hearing what I'm hearing, in all honesty, because I always had trouble replacing something just because we said it's 10 years old, we should replace it. I mean, I think it's our employees that know best when a piece of equipment or something is beyond its useful life. And nothing drives me crazier than, a piece of equipment going to the auction and then a private enterprise buying it and using it for another 10 years. So I appreciate that. Another question I have with respect through you is, do we consider, where's outsourcing in all of this? Is there a time do we consider where there's a significant piece of equipment that might have to be purchased? Because we don't use it very often, maybe we should outsource that. Do we ever consider that in this asset management plan? And I'm not, just to be on the record, I'm not a fan of outsourcing. It's just, there's certain piece of equipment that I need around my yard that I would rent, not purchase, so.
Yep, through you, Chair. That's consistently thought about. So it's not necessarily detailed within the asset management plan. It might be more along the lines of, for some of our other equipment, if we can have it for multi-purpose. But we already have that worked into our operating budget. So I can speak to Public Works budgets, but we have contractor budgets broken into the various lines that we present and bring forward. Those are for some of those outsourcing means. So a perfect item that we would outsource is when we have significant ditching projects. We don't do it often enough to actually have a specialized ditching piece of equipment. So we would outsource a portion of our ditching program when required in certain years to be able to do that. For some of our catch basin cleanouts, it's a short window. We don't have a need for a major vac truck at this time, so we outsource some of those. So we think about what that cost-benefit analysis is over that long run and look at it from that perspective of buying the equipment and only using it for a short period of time and looking it out. That's also part of the larger review that's happening from that from the larger Niagara region and the CAO's meeting is what is in-house within even other LAMs, and do we have some options for sharing some equipment or sharing some resources from that perspective and looking at it from that. So that's happening behind the scenes as well for those considerations. So while it might not actually be fully detailed in the asset management plan, it's happening within that larger budget cycle or larger operational reviews that we would consider. So it is, just want to assure you that it is being done.
I like hearing that. I like hearing the ability to, say, borrow a piece of equipment from another municipality or interchange and, or share that sort of thing, especially this expensive stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mikulik. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, you know, this is sort of like Groundhog Day. I never thought we'd get to this point where we'd start to see the tangibles in this system that the ministry have been demanding. And so it's good to start to see it. It's a little bit painful. I have to say, I think you've done a really great job, you know, breaking it down into 3 big chunks, and you start to make some sense of it. There are huge connections, Mr. Chairman, to the circular economy in the data collection. And so with that data collection and the type of IT that we need to support the entry of that data and the maintenance of it, are we building the need for resources into the operating budgets? Is that where that goes? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Chair, to your worship. The operating budget currently only shows existing IT staff. There was a report done by the Perry Group in 2020, the Corporate Services Master Plan, that identified some gaps in terms of skill sets and recommended net new positions. We did not have capacity in the following budget years to adopt those recommendations, but the asset management plan does highlight that some of those gaps still exist. When it comes to looking at adding staffing costs to our operating budget, that would be something we would rely on finance to help us with. The current operating budget only captures existing staff.
Okay, all right, well, it's something to keep an eye on. Mr. Chairman, it would appear as though our tenacity over the last 10 years has paid off. When you look at some of the numbers, you know, we haven't done too badly, even though sometimes it was a little bit painful. Mr. Chairman, the cemeteries. I have to comment on the cemeteries because the first thing that I thought of when I saw the result was the fact that we hadn't planned effectively enough for land. But you didn't talk about land. Does land not come into the discussion? Would that not be a factor in terms of a poor or a medium situation? Without
No,
land,
it's
we're
a
not
good
gonna-
question. It wasn't, but it would when we look at that service criteria of availability. So when we look deeper at that service level of availability, that's where land would come in, because how much land and how much space do you have based on projections for the next 5, 10, 30 years? But it didn't come up as a result of the initial data, but it's a good point to be discussing with our consultant to make sure that we think about that and take a deeper dive look at that.
Right, so there's still quite a bit of subjectivity in this, which is fair enough. So, Mr. Chairman, thanks very much, Shannon. Mr. Chairman, the most substantial question that I have is really around public education and how we're going to go about this, because sure, they'll be able to read it, but this is a heavy slog, even if you have some idea of where it's going. What are the plans? Who can answer that question? Because I don't know how many times it takes you to hear something to remember it. It used to be 8. I don't know what it is now. But this is not going to be an easy one. And yet, I feel it's extremely important for us to get this message across.
Through your chair to the MERSHIP, I think it's a combination response probably between Charlotte with the finance group, Paul with his team in communication, and then all the other departments. So as I talked, the asset management plans being an iterative process, the communication of it and where we bring forward the information about the state of our infrastructure, the financial requirements, is also an iterative process. So when we have our budget cycle and we're doing the information about that, we're going to be talking about our assets, what needs to be done. When the newsletters are going out, the council newsletters are going out, and we're highlighting some of our works, explaining the why in there and trying to tie things back to our asset management plan. We already incorporate some of that information on the public works side in our quarterly reports that we bring forward. We all bring forward annual reports. So I think it's really of always having that lens of the overall asset management plan and projecting that information throughout it. And with that, you're getting all of your touch points to continually kind of keep that top in mind and leverage the information, because it is a lot of data to just try and throw out to someone. So I think it's breaking it up into pieces and strategically talking about the asset management plans as you're talking about the other items that you're bringing forward, whether or not it be a project or a program or an initiative or a larger message that needs to be brought out. So it's from staff, it's from council, and it's those conversations with residents when they're asking the questions of us. So I'm not sure if Paul wants to, sorry, I'm throwing you on the spot, Paul, but have anything from the communication side and some supports for that. But
Thank you, Jillian, and Chair, through to the Mayor. So, I mean, Madam Mayor, there's an integral, as Jillian just mentioned, integral component of communication and behind this. And, you know, part of doing the asset management plan is to showcase into the community that we have a purposeful plan to not only refresh our assets, but also make sure we're doing it in a financially sustainable way. So part of it is taking this documentation, putting it up on the website, as Jillian had mentioned, but also potentially using Speak Up Lincoln to help communicate some of these ideas. In addition, come budget time, working with you know, the finance team in showcasing this information and making sure that we're using it to help inform our budget decisions for 2025. So we're going to put together a good plan for this, Madam Mayor, and we'll make sure that we're out there communicating it.
Sure, I mean, I have no doubt it'll be a great plan. I didn't know how personal it was going to become, because it is pretty, there's a lot of depth here. Well, we'll go with that for now. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Worship, and that's, you know, Councilor Burnett was alluding to that too. How are we going to get that messaging out? So maybe a good idea going forward, and we did it before at budget time. You know what, when we talked about environmental sustainability, we flagged it with a green leaf. So maybe in budget this year, things that are AMP-driven, we can put an AMP beside it to actually clarify why we're doing it, right? And then that will frame that discussion to the public. We're doing this because of the asset management plan. And like you said, acting CAO in a financially prudent manner, right? And we have a plan, so plan your work your plan. So, excellent. So, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councilor Bernay. The committee receive and file report FN 08-24 regarding the 2024 Asset Management Plan update, and approve the Parks and Facilities Asset Management Plan in Appendix B, and approve the Fleet Asset Management Plan in Appendix C, and approve the Enterprise Services Asset Management Plan, Appendix D. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. Councilor Regima, may I have your vote, please?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you to Van. We have no confidential items this evening. Do we have any committee remarks? Okay, I see none. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 8:28.